to another episode of Stuck in My Mind podcast. I am your host, WIZE. My next guest is the founder of Mind's Eye Creative Consulting. She's a passionate advocate for nurturing the creative spirit within us all. Welcome to the show, Ashton Rodenhiser.
Hey, I'm so
Hello.
happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
The pleasure's mine. I'm excited. So let's do it. All right. So how did you discover your passion for graphic recording and creative consulting?
Yeah. So all right, I'll go back and tell like a little bit of my story because it's kind of important. It
Go
makes
ahead.
more sense. So
Let's,
I
listen,
won't go
go
into
ahead.
yeah. So I really struggled in high school, kind of knowing what I wanted to do for work and what I quote unquote wanted to be when I grew up. And I think secretly I wanted to be an artist, but it was something that I didn't really feel like it was even on the table for me as something to pursue because there was so much negativity around what it was like to be an artist, the starving artist mentality and all of that jazz. So I decided to take early childhood education because I just wanted to be a mom. That's what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I decided to take that, and that ended up leading me into working at a nonprofit family center, where I started to learn about community development and facilitation and how you can bring people together in a safe space to have conversations. And it's less about you as the facilitator having all the knowledge, but more about creating those environments where people feel um, like they can share what's going on with them, and they can learn from others and learn from their own wisdom that kind of comes out, and facilitating the conversation to allow people to feel connected to their own inner wisdom. So I really fell in love with that world around facilitation and how to help people move through processes or decisions in their own way. And I heard about a term called graphic facilitation, but I didn't know what it was.
I still
Um,
don't know what it is.
well, there we'll get into it then. I was like, I don't know what that is, but it sounds cool
It
because
does.
graphic. I'm like, I like creativity. That sounds like a good time. And I took like a 1-day course, and the rest was history. And that was 10 years ago this month that I started this journey. So, yeah, that's kind of how I landed here. So we can kind of go into what all that looks like. But that's sort of the long and short of how I got to where I am today. Yes.
So can you explain what is graphic recording? I'm sure those people who would like to know what it is, because I'm not familiar with it, honestly.
Yeah, so there's sort of, every industry has all their different terms that they like to use, right? So there's graphic recording, there's visual thinking, there's graphic facilitation, there's live illustration. But it's really my job when I am at a conference or in a session that's being facilitated to help people. I visualize the information that flows out of that presentation or that meeting in real time. So when I'm in person, it's literally usually with like paper and markers. And when I'm virtual, it's like on my drawing screen. So as you're hearing information from a presenter or sharing something, I'm drawing it in the moment. And then when the day is over or the hour session is over, you get a visual representation of what just happened, what was just said, what were those key ideas that the presenter was trying to get across, or what were the big themes that came out of that meeting, right? And because most people think in pictures, and we're like, our default mode is like visual thinking, even though we don't usually think about that we're visual thinkers, but we by default we are. It speaks to the majority of the people in the room. So it's like this beautiful way to engage with people in the moment and have that like immediate learning and helping them with that learning. But then there's also the longevity of that information. So like, how many times do we end up at these conferences and there's all this information, but you don't remember a lot of it, right? But if you have this visual snapshot of the lessons that came out of that presentation or the information that came out of that meeting, you actually will remember it. And then stepping further than that, you can actually take action on that, right? Because ideally, when you leave a meeting or a conference, you want to take action on what you just heard, but you can't take action if you don't remember it. You know what I mean? So it's this nice, beautiful way to be able to have that information in like a clear and concise way. Because we oftentimes will like scribble little notes and then you don't understand them and then you put them away and you never look at them again or what have you. So it's these nice kind of one pager graphics of each presentation or meeting or what have you. So yeah.
But can it be of whatever the presenter is presenting? It's just okay. I guess it's something similar to, for me, when I go to conferences and I go to events, I take a lot of notes.
Mhm.
So I guess that way this one's much more visual than it
Right.
is anything. Okay.
Yeah, so it's like taking words that you're hearing, but then using little imagery and lines and little containers and things to like elevate certain ideas that are coming out. So, sometimes a presenter will be like, the 5 main lessons. Like, well, that's easy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you write down the lessons. But it's sometimes it's not that intuitive or they don't make it that clear. So there's the process of me listening as I'm in the room with everybody else. I'm thinking about what I'm hearing. I'm trying to synthesize it. I'm trying to make those connections and then putting that on paper or digital in a way where I'm combining the words, but then I'm also drawing pictures in the moment to help solidify the meaning of that. And maybe a speaker says something at the very beginning and then he doesn't mention it again until the very end. And then I can help make those connections, right? So trying to help weave in the lessons together, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So what is the significance of visual storytelling in the communication of ideas?
Yeah, so like I said, we naturally think in pictures. So the majority of us do, right? And, as cliche as it is, like a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? Like we know that visuals are important to us, right? The example that I like to usually use is like YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world for a reason, right? We want to see somebody make something or do something, right? Folks definitely have different preferred ways that they like to learn, but if you to talk to the majority of people, they'll mention visuals as a preferred way of learning, right? Technically, learning styles have been defunct. Apparently, that's like not a thing anymore. But I think it's more so from a sense that people would get like stuck into one idea of learning, and we learn in so many different ways. I find people just have different preferences. Whereas I did not prefer to learn by listening, but now that I do this work, my like brain is rewired to prefer to listen, right? I don't if I have to read something and then try to create a drawing out of it is like not my preferred way of doing it now. And I've just like honed my listening skills so much so that that's sort of my preferred way of taking in information and then the visual to create something. Um, Stories connect us all. We're all storytellers. And I think some people think that they aren't, but we all are. We all, remember that time when dot dot dot, right? We connect to each other by using stories. That's how stories create an emotional response most of the time. And when you feel something, you remember it, right? And so stories are a really powerful way to help um, bridge connections or bridge different groups of people together, or trying to, you know, get some of your own wisdom across by telling a story, right? And we will remember the story more than the facts at the end of the day. Someone can spew off, well, this and that and this and that. Here's a graph. Here's another statistic. You're not going to remember those as much as you will when someone tells you like a story and you felt something from it. Yeah.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right.
Mhm.
As far as even with the learning, because I wasn't, prior to me podcasting and doing what I'm doing, I was not in media. I didn't do editing. I didn't do any of that. And when I started podcasting and being an independent podcaster, not having a team behind me, not having a machine behind me, I had to learn a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And YouTube, looking,
Yeah.
watching the videos, learning
Yeah.
how to use certain software that I purchased or some certain free software. It was
Yeah.
visual. It was just me. I'm looking at it, looking, and if I didn't understand it, I would go back and look at it again until I
Yeah.
really started being able to apply it on the right here, like looking at the video. And I got two screens, so I had the video here on one side and I had the other one over here, and I'm trying to
Nice.
mimic whatever they're doing. And that's how
Yeah.
I started learning how to edit my videos and how to edit my audio. And
Mhm.
it's just so many different things that I've learned visually. I didn't
Mhm.
like you said, I didn't you said you're absolutely right. I'm a visual learner. It's
Mhm.
easier for me to watch a video and look at the video because if I'm having issues, I go back and rewind and watch it. And so
Mhm.
it's helped. And then doing audio, now I'm realizing I can sit to listen to audiobooks before then sitting and reading the book, because then I might start falling asleep or my eyes start hurting. But if I put my earbuds in and I
Yeah.
and I and I have a book that I want to listen to, it's also helped me a lot compared to just like
Mhm.
doing this has opened up so many different ways for me to learn.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, that we all have different ways that we prefer or what have you, and yeah, I love that, and I think that's why the podcast world in general has been so um yeah, just elevated because people like to listen. You know, some people will like to read stuff, some people will like to watch videos, some people would like just to listen and not have the distraction of video, or they want it combined or what have you, right? So yeah, there's so many opportunities of the way that we bring in information, and for me it's really about, you can bring in the information all day long, that's fine, but can you bring it in a way that you have the deeper understanding in the moment as well, right? Whereas, you know, traditional note taking is all words, but because we think in pictures naturally, like why aren't we combining pictures with the words, right? So, and the example I like to give is like, you know, imagine you're a student in the classroom and there's a traditional note taker where it's just all words, and the next one beside is with words and pictures from the teacher's perspective. Which one can you visually see they're learning? You can't see learning with just words, but maybe you'd be able to understand a little bit deeper if you got to see some words, maybe not as many words, and that's okay. Some words, some little doodles, some little pictures and lines, and how they connect to the information, and it opens up a conversation, right? And at the end of the day, that's what art is, whether it's audio art like a podcast or visual art like a sketch note, which is what I usually call it when you're doing it for yourself, like sketchnoting or visual note taking, right? It's a way to open up a door for a conversation, right?
Okay.
Mhm.
So what kind of challenges do clients typically face when trying to convey a complex concept?
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I like to work in particular, is like when things are very complicated, right? Sometimes, like, I like working with people who appreciate me as the outside, like, observer, and I'm able to look at everything as a whole, right? So when people are saying things, and I'm also not like bogged down with like office politics. Right? So I can kind of hear everybody, and be able to kind of bridge and make those connections and ask clarifying questions for something they might think that something is common sense, but it's not, you know? So, like, I can kind of muddle my way through, how do I take these, what they're struggling with, and try to simplify it so that everybody understands the process or the direction or what have you, right? And when it's visual and you can see we're going to do this and then this is happening, it gives people in the moment an opportunity to go like, no, 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 we need this step before this step, right? And so there's the complexity piece, which I really love. And then there's also how I got into this work as a facilitator, the love that I have for group process in terms of allowing people to feel valued, heard, um, and in that engagement in the space where, you know, you said something, I draw a picture or write down the words right in front of you, and you feel validated. Like like I'm a part of this meeting, I'm a part of this team, and everybody's collective voice is there. And I've been in many situations where I've had people come up to me at the end and say, like, I worked here for like 10, 20, 30 years, and I've never really like felt heard before, right? Like no one's asked me how I felt about something and had it like felt like I was being listened to, right? So there's a lot of power in the pen, right? And how we use something like this form of communicating to allow people to feel heard. So there's so many different ways that people like to use it, and those are sort of my favorite elements is the breaking down complexity to try to help people to move through wherever they're trying to achieve, and then the feeling seen, heard, and validated when you're in a space where you're trying to contribute to the vision of that organization or whatever it is, right? Instead of it being like a top-down approach. So I definitely work with clients who care about the learning or the engagement of the people at that conference or in that room.
What are some of the common misconceptions people have about incorporating creativity into communication?
Oh my gosh. Um, I feel like I've just been talking a lot about creativity in general a lot lately. And I don't know if it's just like I'm sure we could get into a whole other conversation about like AI and all of that, but
Yeah,
like I feel like people, maybe I'm not going to answer your question in terms of misconceptions, but like people, I think as time goes on and we get more and more inundated with so many opportunities to have technology enhance our lives, we're going to have so many things just like automated and make things easy for us in our business and our life. We're going to be seeking opportunities for human connection, right? So I'm not really worried in the world of like, is AI going to take my job? Like, because like maybe an AI could like draw a picture, that's fine, but they're not going to help bridge the connections that humans are going to want to be making even more clearly. And I definitely have my pre-COVID and post-COVID sort of story in terms of I was 100% in person. Now I'm almost 100% digital,
virtual. Yeah.
right? So it's but people are still wanting me, and I still do. I was in 2 in-person events last week. But there's more and more people, even though we were so virtual, they still are going back to in person
Mhm.
because we still value being in person.
That connection. Yeah.
That human to human connection is still, it's important now, and I think as the next few years go on and how things kind of shift technology wise, I think it's going to be even more important. um,
Mhm.
that's my that's my hypothesis. Talk to me in 2 years and see if I was right or
No,
wrong.
no,
Who knows?
no,
Uh,
it is very important. I like the last 2 years I've attended Podfest, and
mhm.
it's been those connections that I've made there, and some of the relationships I've been able to build through. Like I've
Yeah.
so we met through Podmatch, and
Yeah.
Alex Sanfilippo is the creative Podmatch, and I've been able to build a relationship the last 2 years attending these
Mhm.
in-person events, and I've been able to build relationships with other people that I've recorded
Mhm.
episodes prior to really meeting them in person. So
Right.
being able to connect
Yeah.
with them in person
Mhm.
and really get to speak to them and sit down and have some great conversations in person, it's been something that
Yeah.
I highly recommend for everyone who's in podcasting. If there's a local event near you where you can go attend, where you can
Mhm.
network with people and connect with people, it's very important that you have these in-person events because the human connection, like you said, just being able to interact with each other in person, not just virtually, it's a great feeling, and it's
Yeah.
helped me really grow as a podcaster, as an individual, because
Mhm.
you get to build these amazing relationships with people.
Yeah. Yeah. So I didn't answer your question, but I'll kind of tie it all up here in terms of, creativity is a conduit for human connection, right? And you can bring people together to have conversations in so many different ways, but my experience and how I have used art and creativity is to bring people together, I used to run an art at night festival for like 7 years before the pandemic that I started in my little hometown of 8,000 people. And I would double the population of that town in one night. It was a good time, but it was about bringing people together to experience and have conversations about creative things that they wouldn't normally experience. So expanding people's perspective of what art is, right? So we'd have like all different types of art, not just like a painting on a wall when you think of an art, right? So, and for me, it's creativity and art to me are two completely different things. And creativity is like the way that we move through life and create things, right? Whether it's the words that we say or the drawings that we draw, it doesn't have to be art in the sense of something that would be hung in an art gallery, for example, right? So, you know, creative. So, my other hypothesis is that creativity and creative thinkers it's going to be like one of the top skill sets that, you know, in the world people are going to be looking for. They're going to want to have business relationships with people who are creative thinkers. They're going to want employees that are creative thinkers, right? Because we can use technology for so much other stuff, we're going to want to have the people that can think a little bit differently, right? Like my son we're like doing a Halloween thing right now, right? And he wants to be a Halloween store for Halloween. So he doesn't want to just be like a thing. He wants to be like all of the things. He wants to have like little outfits in like a store. And I was like, how in the world? Like I asked him the other day, like, how in the world did you ever come up with this idea? Like, it's like the best idea ever.
It's
He's like, I
original. It's
don't know.
definitely original.
I was like, I don't know. I just thought about it. And I'm like, I just think that's so great. Right. So, like, we're building this thing together. He thought of this idea of like sticking a moon and stars over top of the stores. We were building that last night and like cutting them out of cardboard and painting them and stuff. But it's like, you need to be fostering that in the next generation and in the people that we have in the world right now is that creativity. And I think it kind of makes the world go around. So it's pretty darn important, in my opinion.
So what is one of the most rewarding parts of your work?
Yeah, I definitely feel very honored to be a part of some of these conversations. Sometimes you get to hear, like on the news, you'll hear about an issue, right? And it's like a 10, 15-minute clip with this group says this and this group says that. And you kind of have to form your own opinion about something with the limited amount of lived experience you would hear from someone, right? So sometimes I get these really fascinating opportunities where I get to spend like a whole day or two with a group of people talking about a very particular issue with all of their lived experience. So there could be like hundreds of years of experience within the 20 or 30 or more people in the room, right? You get to learn a lot about a lot of different issues and be able to feel educated a little bit, and not just from what is kind of portrayed or put out there on social media, whatever, but being able to talk and listen and hold the space for people who are trying to work through an issue, especially if it's like an intergenerational thing that's been like going on for a long time. Um, and being able to kind of hear the thoughts, the opinions, that lived experience through people who are in it and are living that issue every day definitely is extremely eye-opening. It's very humbling and it's very honoring. And I definitely, when I enter those types of spaces, um I want to say tread lightly, but I try to be as respectful as possible, right, to them, especially if I'm of a different culture than them or what have you. Is like I'm coming in to help them build these connections and make these connections with one another and their ideas and what they're going through. And sometimes that's, it's not all happy-go-lucky conversations sometimes. Sometimes they're pretty darn heavy,
That
and
that was my
yeah,
next question. That was my next question. Okay, what
yeah.
have you ever had a project that really challenged you and made you think outside the box, and it resulted in something that was magical?
Oh my gosh, I don't know if I can think of one in particular. The one thing that is not ideal is like I'm not always in it for like the long haul. So a lot of people will bring me in for particular piece of work or particular conversation, but then they go off and they do the rest of their community engagement or their reports or whatever. So like that's the only thing that sometimes I have to just be like, I just kind of have to let go of it is like, I am here for to serve them in this moment, but I don't like, and I hope that it has a long lasting impact for the rest of whatever they're doing, but I'm not always involved with the rest of it. Like, there's certainly been a few times where they like, we're doing a year-long project and we're going to get you to come in at this phase and at this phase and at this phase at the end. And I kind of get to help piece it all together. But that's not as common, unfortunately. So usually like the impact that I and the positive experiences that I receive are more in the moment for that thing, that one particular session or what have you. But there are certainly organizations and events and things that I've worked with, like, every year for 6, 7 years now, right? So I get to build relationships and be embedded into those communities a little bit more. Like, a lot of my clients end up like being my friends, because they're just great people. Because I have a rule, if you're not like easygoing and fun, I can't work with you. So, I'm pretty particular about kind of who I work with now because I need to be someone who respects my creative process and lets me do what I do best and be able to support them in that way. But anyways, I don't know if I really answered your question, but there's lots
It's
of
fine.
stuff
Oh,
there.
listen, it's fine.
This is
That's
a
great.
theme of me not answering your questions, Nicole.
It's fine. It's fine. So, so beyond work, you and your family live in rural Canada. How do you
Yeah.
find balance and maintain your creativity in both your professional and your personal life?
Oh my gosh, this is something that I've actually been really wrestling with lately because I call it a champagne problem. I'm very busy in my work and I love what I do and I've been doing it for a long time. But because it is a creative job, I have to be able to just like turn on my creativity like instantly, right? And that takes a lot of cognitive load. It takes like a lot of energy, mental, physical, emotional, sometimes energy. And I put all of that into my work. Right. And so what I'm saying, like that I'm sort of in this space right now of like, how can I regain or keep some of that creativity for myself, for my own creative projects or with my family and stuff like that. So it's something that I haven't really quite figured out a balance for yet. I definitely spend an exuberant amount of time with my family and my children because they're like my favorite people. So I want to hang out with them. And we have a lot of land here. And I spend as much time outside as I possibly can, which is going to be hard soon with winter coming. But we do 1,000 hours outside challenge every year to try to get 1,000 hours as a family outside, which is really hard to do. It's like almost 3 hours a day if you span it out for the whole day. So it's pretty hard, or span it out for the whole year. Um, so I try to feed my creativity and step away from a screen as much as I can. But, I definitely still really love what I do and I want to spend a lot of time doing it. But this like energy creative exchange is something that I'm just starting kind of, I think because I just producing so much work that I'm trying to figure out what that balance looks like for me and how can I regain some of that creativity and keep it for myself to do my own kind of projects and my own stuff. Yeah. So I haven't figured that out yet. It's a work in progress, but I'm working on it.
Okay. So what advice would you give to someone who is looking to okay to explore their own creative potential and incorporate it into their work?
What would I say to somebody who is thinking about how they can infuse creativity more into their work?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I find most people have a very weird relationship with creativity. Majority of people I encounter, they're like, "Oh, I'm not creative."
I would I agree because prior to
Mhm.
me podcasting and starting
Mhm.
my podcast, I didn't consider myself a creator. I didn't think of
Mhm.
myself of
Yeah.
being creative or any of that.
And and what do you think now?
Or it's not it's furthest from that's the further from the truth. I am
Yeah.
creating content constantly.
Yeah,
I'm evolving and learning. Like podcasting is an art form. Like
it
it takes
is.
work. It takes work and
Yeah,
a lot of dedication to really get it to where I really want it. Like I'm still
yeah,
learning and growing. I
yeah.
had a hiccup the other day where did a live show
Mm,
for an hour.
mm.
Lucky it was just me. It wasn't a guest. It was just me, and I had no
Yeah.
sound.
Oh my gosh.
I had no sound, and it
Wow.
was but I laughed. I laughed the whole like, because my friend
Mm,
caught the end of it, and he's like, I know I'm just catching the last of it, but I haven't heard it. I can't hear you." And when
yeah.
I seen the message and I went and looked back and checked out the episode, I had no sound. I was like,
Oh my gosh.
but but
Yeah,
it's those moments that you just laugh and it just happens sometimes. Like even
yeah,
with me being doing this for 3.5 years now, there's still times where still make little mistakes here and there, but
yeah,
you learn from them and you take it and you you laugh at the moment
yeah.
and just make sure now I make sure every time I'm gonna make sure my mic is connected.
Yeah, I like to channel, like, Bob Ross, like, American artist or TV artist personality guy,
Yeah.
like, with his big hair.
Mhm.
Yeah, he had there's a saying that he has around happy little accidents, right? So it was just a happy little accident, It's all good, and then I try to channel that when I'm doing my live illustration work and stuff. I'm like, I'll just turn this thing into something else. Look at that." Um, but I think, yeah, so there definitely is. I think you have to start at the beginning. And the beginning is it's not even about answering the question like how do you infuse creativity into your work or your life? It's about acknowledging that you're a creative human at its core because we have a very weird relationship with creativity and that word is very triggering for people and that's what I'm really experiencing a lot lately and the majority of it is I think the majority of us have had a negative experience with their creativity at some point, whether or not you remember which one it is. I know remember what mine was when I was in grade 4 when my teacher told me I was painting wrong. And in my little, grade 4 brain, while you're like 9 years old, I went, I can't paint. I'm not an artist. I'm not creative. It's over. Right. So, luckily I still did lots of different things, but I didn't paint a whole lot after that until I was in college, and I picked up the paintbrush again. But a lot of us have a story where someone in our life or something happened, and when we internalized that little comment or that little experience, we went, "Oh, we are not creative anymore." Like, no. Whereas like I love asking my children, they're still pretty little, "Are you an artist?" And they're like, "Yeah." Like, duh. Like if you ask children, "Are you an artist?" Their default answer is yes. That is my personal experience. And I know a lot of other people have experienced that too with children. They're just like, yeah, like, of course I am. Like, why wouldn't I be? But somewhere along the lines, whether it happened to you when you were really little or you were your teenager, something happened that told you you were not creative. And then you're like, well, we're going to leave that art stuff to those people who can be creative because
Mhm.
that's not me. Or if you saying, well, I can't draw, so I'm not creative, or I can't podcast, so I'm not creative, or
Yeah.
we have these like really weird definitions of what creative is, what art is. And it's just a funny thing. So I think acknowledging that that's the truth for the majority of people, the majority of the people have had an experience where it told them that they weren't creative. They
Mhm.
have to make a decision that they're going to take back that control. Like, no, no, no. I know I believed that at one point, but I'm going to rewire my brain and be like, no, no, I am creative. And this is the way I like to be creative, or these are the ways I want to try out to see if I'm creative in these different ways. Right. So in order before you can even like, I guess, think about how we're going to infuse that into your work and life, you have to like get comfortable with the concept of like owning that you are a creative human being. And that is hard for a lot of people to kind of to get towards. Yeah, because people say to me all day long, oh, I could never do what you do. I'm like, yeah, but you could though. I could teach it to you in 15 minutes. You'd have to practice a lot.
Mhm.
You'd have to practice a lot. Like I said, I've been doing this for 10 years. You'd have to practice a lot to get good at it, but you could do it and you could actually learn it in a very short amount of time. You know what I
I
mean?
am living proof of
Yeah,
that. I am living.
yeah,
I
yeah,
I I I I didn't do media. I wasn't in radio, none of that. It was
yeah,
just me wanting to do a podcast and just finally facing my fear
yeah.
and and challenging myself to the fact where, because before starting, I had this. It was just a lot of negative self-talk. It was a
Yeah,
lot of me
mhm,
saying, "Oh, I'm not
yeah.
creative. I'm not. No one's gonna want to hear what I'm talking about. I don't have a voice. I sound horrible."
You've
And
got a nice voice, I'm just saying. You got, like, the best podcast voice. I'm just he's not paying me to say this nice
no,
things about him.
no,
I
no.
swear,
But,
people.
but just like how you just laugh, that's what I get from people when I say that.
Right?
They're
Yeah.
like,
He's
"Are
like,
you kidding
"How
me? Like
could you
you have a
not believe
radio
this about
voice." They're like,
yourself?"
"Yeah." They're like, "You have a radio voice. What are you talking about?" And but to
Yeah,
me, at that moment, it was
yeah,
just the fear and me and just
yeah.
the years of just like how your teacher told you at 9 years old, "Oh yeah,
Mhm,
you're painting that wrong." That's gonna
mhm,
put doubt in anybody's mind. That's gonna put
mhm.
doubt. They're like, "Oh, you're not creative. You're not intelligent, or whatever it is." And
Yeah,
that's what happens. We allow other people to cast their beliefs on us. And so
yeah,
when they say that we're not creative or we're not talented enough,
mhm.
we tend to believe that. And so we have to really struggle through that and
Yeah,
come out the other side and be like, "No, I am creative. I don't care what
mhm.
that person said about me. I know who I am. I know what I'm capable of." And so it's just been for me, just like I said, I didn't think I was a creative person until I
Right.
finally started doing my podcast and I had to start doing thumbnails and started doing all these things. I started getting into
Yeah,
Canva and
yeah,
all these different programs. And I'm realizing, okay, I am creative. Like
yeah.
all these years I've been thinking I'm not. And it took me 40 something years to realize I was creative.
Yeah, and I heard something recently about talent. I'll have to, if I find it, I'll share it with you. But it was something about like talent doesn't exist, like it's not a thing. Like because like we might have more inclinations of our desires of what we like, but it's just choosing that thing and doing it. Like that's what gives you talent is just doing it and closing the beginner gap that Lisa Condon talks about in finding your artistic voice book around like you want your skills to be here but they're here and you need to do the work to get
Yeah.
your skills to that point, and that's you watching probably thousands of hours of YouTube videos to know how to edit your podcast and do your thumbnails and do all that stuff, right? You weren't like born talented podcaster. You built your talent through
Mhm.
the work and through the grind and through the passion, and like the word that I usually refer to myself is like I'm not special, I'm just tenacious. Like when I decide I'm going to do something, and when I found this work, I was like, I'm going to do it and I want to do it well. And
Mhm.
I threw everything I had at it. And I had like little babies at the time. You have to throw everything at it if you really want to get really good, so it's less like, I love those stories about like the comedians or the musicians, and you see they just like blow up overnight. But if you look back,
It
they
was
had
hard.
it, it's like whatever that saying is, like, I'm a 20-year overnight success story or
Yeah.
something, right? But that's the truth for a lot of people and a
Mhm.
lot of creatives of, yeah, I've been doing this for this long, but just this one podcast episode ended up just sort of blowing up, and now I'm a little bit more well known, or this graphic went, or this reel, like, it's a funny thing. Like, I was on a podcast recently, and they put a reel on Instagram and it went viral,
Mhm.
and there's 1,500 hate comments about what I said on this podcast. And the comment that I said was around not praising children for their artwork, and people were so triggered by that, right? I probably shouldn't made like a sweeping comment like don't praise children, but I'm like, art, like when children create, and this goes for us humans too, it's a door to a conversation, right? It's not meant to be, that's beautiful, goodbye forever. Like, you're just creating for production. You're creating for the validation that you're going to get that someone said it was beautiful, right? And you burn yourself out. Either you're a child or you're an adult. If that's all you receive, or if that's all you're doing it for, is for praise and validation, right? We create, and we want people to have a conversation with us about what it is that we're creating. That's also the human connection piece, right? But people were so triggered. I'm like, whoa, I got 1,500 haters online. This is crazy, like overnight. But obviously, like these people, like, I would say they probably didn't have a lot of love and praise, right? So they needed that. And like, I totally honor that space that they're in. But for me, in terms of like creativity, it's it's a way to connect with one another. It's not about being praised. Like, you're going to get the self-satisfaction of having conversations with people. But if the only thing that you got was, that was a nice podcast episode, that was a nice podcast episode, and that's all you got from it, eventually you'd get sort of like, yeah, okay, I guess I'm good. But is that enough to keep me going? Like, there has to be something else there that feeds your soul about podcasting, that gets you out of bed every day to do it. And maybe in the beginning, praise gets you kind of over that hump. You got some cheerleaders and you're like, yeah, maybe I can do this. But that's not what's going to get you over the long haul.
Yeah, no,
Thank
it's
you for
work.
coming for my TED talk about that.
No, it's definitely the work. It's the work you put into it. Because if you listen to one of my earlier episodes, you can see the growth from those earlier episodes to where
Absolutely.
I am
Yeah.
now. And
Yeah.
it's the work that I put into the show. It's the work that I put into myself. It's me wanting to improve. It's me investing in quality mic, investing in a quality camera,
Yeah.
getting me the proper setup for me to do my show. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
it was me wanting to, and the thing was, I was like, people are giving me something very precious. They're giving me their time. And my goal is
Absolutely.
to make
Yeah.
sure that they get the best quality that I can provide for them, the best sound, the best video, because they're giving me something very precious. And I just felt that I had to invest in myself in order to give them that.
Absolutely. Yeah, but you have to believe in yourself and do that work to get to that point, right? So
Mhm.
I think that's a beautiful thing. And we all, yeah, I think like we tend to compare ourselves to people who've been, like, we idolize others, right? We put people on pedestals, like, oh well, I'll never be able to draw like Ashton, or oh, I'll never be able to have a nicely produced podcast like Will. Like, it's not possible, right? And I'm like, it's just a matter of the tenacity that you put in, and the drive and the determination to not give up. And like, us determined people are, unfortunately, the minority. And it saddens me when people give up on their creativity in particular, because it's something that morphs and changes over time. And you can love something for a while and then it morphs into something else creative, and that's okay too. But you kind of need to just always like be in that space where like creativity is important to just being in the world and building connections and relationships with others. Yeah.
Okay. What we didn't get to talk about is Mind's Eye Creative Consulting, which is your
Yeah.
company. What made you? I love the name, first of all.
Oh,
Um,
thanks.
so what made you want to start your own business? Like, this is something that you really.
Yeah, so it's a funny thing. I think sometimes when there's a job that you want to have, but no one's hiring for it, you have to create a business. So I never sought out to create a business. Newsflash, not all business owners like thought they were going to create a business. So I really wanted to figure out how to do this more than a hobby. And so I sought out others who were doing it. I attended a conference and I was like, I was looking for the proof, right? That's what happens.
Mhm.
There's an Ashton tip for you. Look for the proof of what you want to do, because you can look for the proof that it's not going to work all day long and watch all the YouTube videos of how podcasts fail. But you look for the proof. You look for the ones that succeed and you emulate and you inspire from those, right? You get inspiration from those. So anyways, I started like looking for the proof that was out there. How are other people doing this full time? And 99.9% of them created their own business. So I was like, oh, I guess I have to create a business now. I guess I have to figure that whole thing out. So I got into this, one, never going to art school, and two, never not going to business school. So also YouTube was my best friend when it came to like, how do I create a website and how do I do a logo and how do I do all
Yeah.
these things, right? So, you know, and I didn't start off with the most beautiful website and the most beautiful portfolio and the most beautiful things, and zero YouTube subscribers and zero followers and all that stuff. But mind you, I don't really look at those metrics too much in terms of my success. But, um, that's, luckily, entrepreneurship fits very well for me. I love it. My husband and I joke, because he also owns a business, that we are both unemployable. Nobody would want to hire us because we would just want it our way, right? So, and he was a lot of inspiration for me too, because he started his business right out of high school doing like landscaping and things. So he didn't have any experience in creating a business and didn't go to business school. And I'm like, well, he's smart and I'm smart. And he figured it out. I could figure it out. Um, so yeah, it was kind of just like I had to create a business because this is what I wanted to do for work and no one was hiring for it. And then I just really kind of went down the path of, luckily, one of the things that I'm very grateful that I did, I was on a bit of a self-development journey at the time. So I really focused a lot of my self-development energy into like business and mindset and money and rewiring my brain to try to believe that I could be successful and that I deserve to get highly compensated. And like, I honestly, I tell people that I spent just as much time, if not more, on my mindset work as I did on my actual business, or like the actual like
Mhm.
business activities, or like the actual like drawing pictures and stuff like that, because it was so important, especially in those early, not just days, but early years of believing that it was possible, and seeking out other people that were doing the same kind of thing and stuff like that. So I think a combination of those things, because I certainly have seen people in my industry that haven't that struggled through COVID big time and just struggled before COVID. And the only thing that I could see as a differentiating is the mindset work that I've done compared to what they told me that they didn't do, right? So I know how important it is to be thinking about your thinking when it comes to creating a business. And I really had to, this took a couple of years, but I really had to like lean in on how I want to be in my business, not the bro that talks about all the funnels and all the stuff. Like I want to do it my way that feels authentic and genuine to me as Ashton in this world, someone who has a business. But yes, I'm selling, and yes, have to, pitch myself to people, and I have to do things, but I can do it in a way that feels really genuine and authentic to who I am. And when they hire me, they're hiring the Ashton experience. I'm not like, they either get the value or they don't. And I'm not there to convince them one way or the other. I'm just, this is how I could help you out. If we work together, we'd have a good time and you get a lot of value out of it. But if you don't want to do it, that's fine too. In the beginning, that was a really hard one. But now I feel a lot more grounded and rooted about just being who I am and how I want to run my business, even though it may not fit the stereotypical mold of business. But I do it in leading from my intuition and listening to what my heart says a lot more than what the business brains might say.
Cool. Yeah. It's funny because when you talk about like for me, I've applied to speak at a few events,
Mhm.
and I've been denied. So
Right.
I'm from March. I'm working with someone, and I'm gonna put together my own event. And it was like, you know what? No one's gonna have me speak. I'm going to
I love
create my
that.
own. I am going to create my own event. I know some people that are some wonderful speakers. I'm gonna ask them to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Most of them had said yes already, and
Yeah.
so I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna make this happen
I
and put
love
this event
that.
together because again, it was like I said, I've applied to a couple of different things and
Mhm.
got no got no as an answer. And I'm like, you know what? Why can't I put an event together? I know the people. I know people who are doing events, who are creating events. I'm just gonna
Yeah.
create my own event. I'm gonna speak at it. That's it.
I love
And
that.
so I'm working on that. We're aiming for sometime in March. We're
Nice.
getting all the stuff situated now, but
Love
it
that.
was it was just something I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna just do it myself. Can't
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
rely on anyone.
I love that. And if there's a gap and an opportunity and people, want to connect and you can be a conduit for that, like, why not? That's a beautiful thing. And then you can use that experience on your next speaker application that you spoke at
Yeah.
this event. They don't even know that you organized it.
Yeah, and that's what I was like, you know what? I'll just put together an event. It'll give me some gives me proof that I can speak in public and have my recording. And so
Yeah.
yeah, it was
That's
just like
fun.
it was just me just "Oh, all right, fine. And it's funny because that's how a lot of there's some writers and actors and stuff that they ended up writing their own stuff because they couldn't get put in movies or like the Wayans brothers.
Yeah.
They wrote their own stuff because nobody was hiring them. So they're like, all right, well, we're gonna create our own lane. We're gonna so I
Yeah.
figured, why not? Why can't I just create my own lane? There's people doing it. I
Yeah.
I've built relationships with people that are more than willing to help me put the event together.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and I've when I was telling the art festival that I organized, like when you create something, you can name the values and what's important to you, right? And you can find people who have the same values, right? Like, your event, if you don't want people pitching at your event, like all the speakers just end up, they're just talking about their products the whole time. Like that's a pretty strong value. Whereas like a lot of these events you go to and it's just like them pitching, it's like this much value and this much pitching. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And it should be kind of the opposite. You can still
yeah,
pitch and be there and talk about your book or talk about your thing. That's really awesome. But when you create your own thing, you can really be rooted in your values, and you can make decisions based on those values and find others that are aligned with that. And then it makes the organizing of it actually a lot easier because you're rooted in that and those values, and what's important to you. And then you'll attract people who are looking for that type of event and that value system for sure, right?
Yeah.
I think there's so much room for I just getting to know you in this short amount of time, I could see your event being very authentic, very genuine, very caring about who was there, and like there's not enough of that in the event space. And I do a lot of events, a lot of
Oh
them.
no,
So,
I agree with it's doing this is really giving me the opportunity to really be myself
yeah,
and just be able to just oh man, I just love the fact that at least in this community there are there are so many people that are willing to help you and
yeah,
and and,
that's beautiful.
and like I said, it's I've built some great relationships with some amazing people, and just the fact that they're willing to help me to get this done and do the it's a blessing to me. It's just shows me like at least personally to me, it just shows me how much they value me and what they think of me when they say yes.
Yeah,
And I really do pride myself on building some great relationships and showing support to my friends that are in the industry or whatever industry they might be in.
yeah,
I just try my best to support if it's clicking and sharing something that they posted
mhm,
or connecting people together. That's to me is what I truly do and love the most is being able to help people and
mhm.
making it like you mentioned analytics earlier. I don't really don't care about the analytics. It's the messages that I receive from people telling me
That's your
I had
measure. Yeah.
I had a great time listening to this episode or episode impacted me because you were it resonated with me. Like I had a friend, like one of my early shows, probably like 30 something. It was me and a friend from high school,
Mm,
and we had a great conversation, talked about self-development,
mm,
growth, uh, goal setting. I started my own, like yourself, during the pandemic. I started my own production company,
mhm,
and so we just had a great conversation. And I had another a friend of ours from high school. She sent me a message and was like, listening to two guys that I grew up with talk
mm.
about starting a business and
Yeah,
self-development and all this stuff. And I've been on the fence about starting my own business.
yeah.
And to hear two guys I grew up with talk about this
Mm,
made me go like, okay, if these two guys that I know personally that I grew up with are doing this,
yeah,
why can't I?
yeah.
Well, what is it? What is it that they have that I don't? That I and so she started a business.
I love that. That's awesome.
So it's
Yeah.
months, yeah.
Yeah, you can get inspiration from anybody and from anything, and when you have that personal connection, it just amplifies that even more. That's for sure. I love that story. That's a beautiful one. And newsflash, starting a business doesn't have to be as scary as it sounds.
No,
It's hard in the sense, but not hard in the sense that you think it is. You
no,
know what I mean?
like
Like the nuts and bolts, not that hard. The
no, yeah, like
mindset
the work of
stuff,
it, like, yeah,
yeah.
like creating the content is not the hard part of it. It's the other
Yeah.
part, the marketing is all the other stuff. That's the hard, but
And you can
uh,
learn those things, or you can
yes,
hire someone to do them, right? You can
hmm
hire or figure it out, the stuff that might be more hard, but
hmm
yeah, that's one thing that really frustrates me, and one thing that I do love to talk about is, like, as a creative entrepreneur is, like, I've created this very bizarre business out of doing this very specific thing, and I'm feed my family, with it, and have a nice life here in Canada. It's a great time. But, when my dad told me at Canadian Thanksgiving that whenever he tells anybody what I do, everybody's response basically is, "And she makes money doing that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do. Wouldn't you like to know? Right. But people just don't know what they don't know. And you don't need to get upset with them. They just don't know. And the word that I've been using a lot lately is ignorance. But ignorance doesn't have to be a bad word. It doesn't have to be condescending like we've used it.
Mhm.
It just means you just don't
No.
know.
Yeah.
Right. And that's okay that you don't have all of the information. Right? It just means like maybe the opinion you formed about that thing isn't as well informed,
Yeah.
right? You have an opinion, may not be as well informed. Like, I think starting a business is really hard, is an opinion that is formed, whether or not that person has a lot of experience starting businesses before or being around a lot of people who started businesses or like people who haven't created a creative business, they wouldn't know what it is I do every day and how I make money doing it, right? But
Yeah.
there's the negative rhetoric of artists don't make money, so how in the world would she ever make money doing that, right?
Yeah.
I got someone to survey some of my clients a couple years ago, and those clients would told my person like she needs to charge more, right? So you have clients telling your third party person, oh yeah, she shouldn't charge us more, but she should charge more in general, right? So, which is nice, but yeah, anyways, a bit of a tangent there, but I'm happy for your friend. That's a beautiful thing, and
Yeah.
glad that you are a conduit for that because that's really special for sure.
But now, we've been talking for
I
over an
know.
hour.
It's happened. I just love like, it's just such a good time. I'm
Oh
glad we
no.
actually had the time, though. It
Yeah,
wasn't
no,
like
no.
a
I
20-minute
love I
conversation.
love it. I love it. I love this is what
Yeah.
I love about my this is what I love about doing the podcast and because when you were talking earlier and you was talking about being the authentic self and like how we just I like to just let the conversation flow and I'll have questions, but I just like to let the conversation flow and let everybody just be themselves. Like
Mhm.
there's sometimes I'll have a guest and they'll send me a list of questions that they want to answer
Mhm.
and I'm like, I might ask this one, but I'm not gonna ask every single one because I want it to be more authentic. I want you to come out.
Yeah.
I don't want you to come off sounding like you're trying to sell something. I want you to come off to be yourself, have a good time, and then there's gonna be a point in the show where you're gonna actually come and get to plug away and let everybody know where they can find you and all that. But for the most part, I want them to get to know you, get to see that
Mhm.
you're a real person and you're not just here trying to sell something, that you really are
Mhm.
someone who has a story to share and has a vision and is willing to share with people. So
Yeah. No, and that's a beautiful thing. I love your format. And I love that we got to talk about you and your podcasting journey while we were doing while we were talking about my stuff too. It's like a beautiful, like
conversation, yeah,
it's cyclical. Yeah, very cyclical.
yeah.
Got to talk about your stuff too and your journey. So that's awesome. Yeah.
But now is I mentioned it. Now is the time where you get the solo layout and you get to plug away and let everybody know where they can find you, where they
Oh my
can
gosh.
everything.
Yeah, so mindsedcreative.ca. Though I work globally, my .ca is Canada. So all things Mind's Eye Creative is if you want to chat about an event or a meeting, in person or virtual, we could chat about what that would look like for me to visualize that for you. But I also have a community, a newsletter, and a book around learning how to do this for yourself. So if you have a kid who needs to take notes, if you do a lot of meetings and you're like, that might be fun and I could actually, deepen my learning. Sketchnote.school is all things to learn how to sketchnote. And promise you it's not hard and there's no prerequisites. You don't have to learn how to draw anything. And my book, The Beginner's Guide to Sketchnoting, can be found on that website or Amazon or basically anywhere. So yeah.
Awesome, awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for being a guest. This was wonderful.
Yeah.
Usually the episodes I try to keep them 35, 45 minutes long, but when you're having such a great conversation and you're having such a good
I
time
know.
just flies and just
You
like
don't even get into it until about 30 minutes. That's the
yeah,
problem. It's like that's when the good stuff starts.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But usually when that happens, the conversation tends to just go on a little bit longer than usual. But
Yeah, it's either
I,
30 minutes or 90, like, take your pick, you know?
yeah, yes, and I love, and you can. That's when I can tell when the episode is going real well when I do hit the hour mark. Like when I do hit the hour mark, I'm like, and it just feels like it hasn't been an hour. It just flew by, and
Yeah,
so that to me, those are the shows I love to do. It's just the ones where the conversation just flows
yeah,
and we just have a great time.
I love
But
that.
thank you so much for being a guest. This has been
You're
so much fun.
welcome. Yeah, and I don't you know, I'd come back anytime.
Oh,
I
you're
had a moment.
welcome anytime. You got any projects coming? If you get any projects in the next few months coming out, just send me a message.
Yeah,
I've had repeat guests on. I love to have repeat guests on to see where you're at and
yeah,
share
check
your
in.
career. Yeah,
6-month check-in every 6 months, you have to have
sounds
a
good. That sounds good.
conversation. No, I love that. No, I really appreciate, the invite. I'm glad that we got connected, and, this was, a beautiful way to spend my evening, so I really appreciate it, your
Thank you.
time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. But don't leave just yet. Let me close out the show, and we'll chat a little bit more off the air.
Mhm.
But yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right. Oh, that wonderful time. Had a wonderful time. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Cece, how you doing? Thank you for always coming by. She said hello.
Aw.
She talked about my quiet storm voice. Thank you.
Yes. Darn
She
right.
she laughed at it. But thank you all everybody who tuned in, everybody who supported the show. Greatly appreciate it. As always, big shout out to my Real Wise fam, Poppy J, Brandy J. Love you guys. Shout out to my man Cole Johnson, my mentality partner. Love you, brother. Shout out to the boss lady, Fina. Love you and appreciate you, baby, for everything you've done for me. Shout out to my guest, Ashton, for coming through and having a wonderful conversation. I love it. I love it. And as always, a big shout out to all the essential workers out there. God bless y'all. Be safe. You know how your boy Wise does it. Peace out.